Yeah, getting into that heart space is like allowing something to change or transform your sense of who you are. And I think that, and who the other person is. And like that, there's, in a sense, when you let somebody into your heart, you're letting their being transform your being. Like you're not the same after. There is a kind of wanting to fall in loveness in the heart types where there's wanting to be in that place where identity is touched all the time.
The big hormone Enneagram.
Let me lay it on the line. I got a little freakiness inside. Let you know that the man has got to deal with it.
Hi, I'm John Lukovich, sexual self-pres, golden five wing, 458 trifix.
Hi, I'm David Gray, self-pres sexual 9 with a 1, 974 trifix.
What up? It's Emeka. I'm an 8 wing 7, sexual self-pres with 854 fixes.
Hi, I'm Nancy. I am a self-pres social 3, wing 4, with a 369 trifix. If you like our podcast, guys, make sure you go like and subscribe us on the Apple Podcast app. And if you really like us, you should definitely leave us a review.
I think people really like the thing we did with the gut stuff. So
Yeah, people have responded really well from like people I've talked to.
yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff. So if we could do that for the heart center,
Yeah, where do you guys want to start?
I guess I could start here. The thing that I realized, I think one thing that hit me, something that people don't know about type threes, is that type threes are fucking emotional.
Yeah.
I just
Yes.
like
Yeah.
the impression that I got from the literature and the stereotypes is that type threes are pretty cold, and that has not been my experience at all. So I was trying to understand, because I've dated. I mean, one way that I learned the Enneagram is through dating the types. It's just to getting really close with someone and sort of figuring out like how they respond to relational dynamics and things like that. So I've tended to date or end up with nines, sevens, and threes, and I had long-term relationships with all those types. But I find that the types that really got under my skin emotionally were the threes, which didn't really make sense to me. And I started to, I think my experience with you fours has helped me understand that what heart types are doing is fabricating an emotional landscape. And I don't know
Say
if that
more
makes
about what that means.
Yeah.
so I recognized that, like, when something happens, like an emergency happens, I call one of you guys or one of my friends, and if I'm talking about it, I'm gonna go through like, this is what happened. And I'm coming from the moving center. I'm gonna explain like sort of the events and what needs to happen next. And I recognize that,
Experiential.
yeah,
Mhm.
experientially, I'm gonna put you in the experience of what's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
Versus a hard type, they're gonna talk about what things are happening, but it's coming from creating an emotional. I recognize that I could get swept up in how I felt about the sequence of events, that they were sweeping me up in a sequence into an emotional landscape, and that I was getting, because I don't feel like I get in touch with my feelings as an eight, but I feel like heart types can put me there more so
Mm.
than any other like head types or body types. I just realized like I think I've only really felt like deep a sense of falling in love with someone with type threes, which doesn't make sense to me. Which is not a matter of like the amount of chemistry I felt with them, but like the sense of really getting emotionally swept up in someone. And I recognize now that is because that type structure is creating an emotional landscape, even though it can sometimes feel like, as an assertive type, like a threes are maybe fabricating certain emotions to match what, I don't know, uh, they want, the response that they might want from me. But it's still an emotional landscape. I'm getting put into a certain emotional state based on, because they're hard types. And so that's been like a very interesting new insight for me, because I mean, I think people obviously expect twos to be emotional and maybe fours to be emotional in a different way, but people don't think about threes as emotional types. So I want to talk about that more in terms of how hard types are channeling emotions, or what kind of archetypal energy is coming from that space, and what that can do for other people.
Mm.
I think that's a great point. Like, when I'm more online, let's say, I get really pissed off. I mean, even in workshops and stuff, the way that threes get characterized as emotionless or cold or whatever, it's like I find threes very, very heartfelt. And like, yeah, I think Emeka, you put it really well, like putting you into an emotional landscape. But it's sometimes it's like not as direct as like, I don't know, let's say two or something like that.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
but yeah, it's really there.
What
I hope it
about
resonates.
Josh? It was mentioned a couple of times that that like he easily cries.
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
I think we can keep Josh's name in here. Like,
sure.
Josh boy, we love you.
Yeah. Little soft boy 3.
Little soft boy 3. And we love
Bermuda.
our soft boy 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to hear from Nancy about like this.
Oh, okay.
Emotionality.
Okay, I wasn't sure if there was more of that or not. Um, okay.
'Cause that was the reason you mistyped as a 4, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I had too
So say
many
more.
emotions. So it's hard to say more because it's like the only way I know how to exist is in an emotional landscape, not a physical landscape. So
Mhm.
it's kind of eluding me a little bit because it's the only thing I really know. But I've had experiences where like I'm talking to my therapist and stuff like that, and she will have to ask me, well, what actually happened? Not how do you feel, what actually
Mm.
happened. So I mean that's an example of it.
Well, for example, like let's say I want to sort of get the experience right now of how you might frame a situation. So let's say you had terrible weekend, you fell out with a friend of yours, and let's say something like that happened to me. I'd call you up and be like, "Hey, I had a huge fight with OD, and I said this, he said that, and he called me this, and I was really offended, so I called him that, and now we're not talking anymore." And so, how would you frame a similar sequence of events? Like, how would you explain something like that to me?
Like if I experienced it.
Yeah, if you had a weekend like that.
Well, I think a lot of yeah, so I think a lot of it would include me framing things like, well, this has been building up for a while and this made me so like sometimes so I'm thinking back to an experience I had a long time ago with a friend. It's like this made me feel a certain way, so then I reacted badly, but it was okay that I reacted badly because she made me feel this way, so that's why I
Okay.
said this. So there's a lot of framing and justifying.
Yeah, yeah,
um but that, I
yeah.
mean, I feel like that's a bit of sickness coming in where I'm like, no, 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 please be on my side.
Yeah, that's part of it. But I think part of the experience for me of getting put into an emotional landscape is because you're describing how you feel as an experiential type. I'm feeling those feelings with you.
Hmm.
And I'm getting to like you're taking me through the range of feelings that you've had as you're describing what's going on. And I think that's part of why I feel like hard types can get me swept up
You get swept up, yeah.
into how they their emotional landscape, and which is not really how I navigate or think about things.
What you were just doing there is sort of giving emotional context.
Yes.
Mhm.
Well,
Mhm.
and that's kind of a like a goal. So sometimes if I'm really fired up, if I'm explaining something to someone, if I don't feel like they're getting swept up in the emotional landscape with me, I get really upset.
Hmm.
I'm like, you need to feel this with me because like I need someone else
Uh,
here with me and you're not fucking feeling this.
mhm.
So this is the mirroring part that I started
Yeah.
to get clued in
There you
on.
go. Mhm.
Mhm.
Because as a I had recent experience in the past year with the sexual 3, so I really was able to get it as a sexual type, because as a sexual type, as a sexual body type, there's a sense of I have to kind of pull people into an experience of what I'm like, and
Mhm.
sort of like shake people up in terms of their their boundaries, psychological or physical. But with a sexual heart type, it felt like she was laying out an emotional sort of table setting. Like this is how I feel about you. Take a look at it. You know, how do you feel about it?
Mm-hmm.
And can you reciprocate um this emotional landscape that I've set out for you? It's really interesting. Like it was purely like chemistry based on mirroring her emotion, what she felt about me. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a way that an example of this. She's never going to listen to this podcast, so she's not going to know. But she said something like that when we kissed, that she feels transported, and I said, transported where? And,
Oh,
but
My body type.
but
Yeah,
it
I
was
want to
kind of like,
experience it.
Womp womp. It was like the most romantic thing she could have said, and you were just like, huh?
Where are we going?
What?
Where are we going? I want to feel it in my body.
yeah,
She's like, I love you so much. And you're like, oh, that's nice.
so there's like
Thanks,
this
man.
way it became this big joke because of how different we were, of how she would say something that was purely like emotional fluff, but it, kind of like sort of like just illustrating her feelings, with
Mhm.
words, and I would make it like this literal thing, and she would say, you're so honest. Whereas, because that was just like my genuine response, but it was kind of also kind of funny. But that's showing how fucking heart versus body, where it's not even, it doesn't matter like what she was really saying, it was about how she felt.
Mhm.
And yeah, it just really, it's so different. I don't I think I'm heart last. I mean, I am heart last. I'm an 8. And so it's such a complete opposite way of framing and navigating through life. And so it really has a strong effect on me because it's like my blind spot.
Yeah, I mean, that's like how I exist. I think when Brian and I first started dating, that was something that was really frustrating for me. Like I would be venting to him and he would tell me, he's like, I can't handle how many times you repeat things. And I'm like, but I feel like you're not understanding this. And he's like, I'm
Ah,
understanding it, I'm just not reacting to it. And I'm like, but that's
ah,
not okay. So it's just
yeah,
like how I constantly exist. I just like have this emotional landscape. And if you're not in it with me, I'm just like, where are you? Are you even here?
huh,
Do you even exist in this world?
One of the things I find with threes is that they can sometimes paint the emotional landscape very overtly. Like
yes,
when they're feeling safe, they're really heartfelt. And I think that's what we were speaking to earlier of our friend Josh crying. It's like, which is beautiful. It's like, like it's you really feel the genuineness and the authenticity and the heart being touched in the moment. But I also think that people can really struggle with threes because, it's like I do think that there's some level of that operating at all times. But on the other hand, like I'm trying to get my hands on it, but it's different from like an 8, where an 8 is like trying to get from point A to point B, the experiential thing. But there is that kind of doer mode of
yes,
3 that
Hmm.
can be hard to grapple with emotionally. That can I sometimes feel like they're trying to um I'm trying to think of how to put it, but it's
like
like
make it happen. It's like it feels like to me that, I mean, experiencing all the hard types is that, I mean, all the hard types are fabricating their emotional landscape. So there's an aspect of the realness of what they're experiencing versus trying to make it happen. And sometimes with 3, I can feel like it's like, are you actually feeling this, or are you making this emotional landscape happen? And I think part of what threes that I've had experience with, I think the attraction there can be that they view gut types as like, if a gut type actually feels something, it's not like gut types aren't fabricating emotional landscapes. And so there's a sense that if a gut type feels something, then it's just like what they're actually experiencing.
Hmm.
Whereas
right.
hard types can just sort of like, creating, it's almost like, I don't know if it's real unless it's mirrored back to me, like
Hmm.
whatever the emotional landscape is. Even for 4, it's like, this is how I feel and this is how I view myself. I'm gonna need someone somewhere to at least mirror some aspect of this back to me. Otherwise, it's like not real.
Yeah,
What
that's actually a really good point, because if someone doesn't mirror me back, I feel like I'm being ridiculous. Like this emotion isn't allowed or isn't real or something.
That's probably like an attachment type thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because as a frustration type, it's like I have a very strong sense of what's real as a four, but I don't expect other people to get it or mirror it or whatever. Like I just sort of assume separation. I assume it's not going to be mirrored. But what I think maybe useful for ourselves and for anybody listening is to think about the heart itself, because like the body in a sense sort of straight up where you're talking about boundaries and life force, and like
Yeah.
it's something everybody
Mhm.
is very in a sense clear on or can be made clear on. And the thing that I've come to understand about the heart center is that it's sort of like, and I've talked about this in other ways before in other pods or whatever, but that the heart is like the heart doesn't belong to the personality, right? Like we don't get a choice in how we feel and respond to things or what moves us, right? So it's like if you are fucking walking down the street and you see like a kitten that's like hungry and starving, if your heart is open, you may become a cat mom or dad. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you're just touched by something and it changes you. And that's the thing of the heart is it's about identity and it's about who we are and how we know ourselves, but we can be more or less in touch with that. And so, when we're speaking to like a heartfelt three, it's like they're very in touch with their immediate sense of self in that moment. And when you're getting a three that's like trying to sell you something basically or sell you their image, it's like they're not at all in touch with that heart realness. They're in touch with an image over the heart. And so,
Mm-hmm.
that's the struggle of all people, but especially heart types, is this sense where the individual is more like a custodian of their own heart. Like the heart and the personality are almost on different terms. And so you can do something that feels in sync or out of sync with your heart. And so I always like, it's stupid, but I always compare the heart to a cat. And I think I've talked about
Mhm.
this on this podcast, right? Like
Yeah.
go up to the fucking
It's
cat and you're
so
like,
accurate.
yeah, there's something to it. It's like if you go up to the cat and you're like, come here, cat, like the cat's gonna run away. Same thing with your heart. But if you're like sort of indirect and subtle and you give it space, then the cat sits in your lap, you know? And it's like that with our hearts, our identity. It's like there's a part of the personality that is not it's not present enough to be always in contact with the personality with the heart. It needs to kind of catch up and to sync. And so part of like inner work is just being present enough to be somewhat in direct contact with the heart itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it reveals itself on its own terms and sometimes stubbornly. And that's why like relationships, that's why sense of self, purpose, all these things can be so fucking complex and so fucking tumultuous because it's like there's this disparity. And so, at least like coming back to being a four, four is the type that is most like I'm gonna stick with what my heart wants no matter what, and I'm gonna make as much space for my heart as I can no matter what. But I'm going to forego or turn my back on everything else. Like I'm going to turn my back on functioning. I'm going to turn my back on dealing with shit I don't want to deal with. I'm going to turn my back on the ugliness. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like where the three sometimes goes, okay, I'm gonna surrender heartfeltness or
Mhm.
identity to function. The four goes the opposite way and is like, no, it's all my heart. But even in so doing, it's like still grasping for the heart. So like again in the cat metaphor, it's like trying to capture the cat and the cat just starts scratching and biting and being like, no, I hate this and all this kind of stuff. But it's a similar principle underneath it.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Mhm.
David, what's been your experience as a gut type with heart types that you've dated or been with or whatever? I mean, I'm saying, do you experience the similar shit that I'm talking about here? Like that they can kind of get you caught up in some feelings more so than any other types?
Yeah, I guess I've noticed it more overtly, like with twos, where there's definitely it's kind of like the maybe the cat metaphor, and maybe it's I can't tell if it's the same way or not until I think it through here, but um, it's kind of like it's more overtly sort of forcing a heart landscape, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Hmm.
like pumping the emotional um, field
Right.
between you and the two, and they're looking, is it going to, they're looking to get the thing mirrored back to them and looking for responses. And as you guys know, I'm famously not very reactive and responsive. And so
Really?
I've
Surprise.
yeah, so I've frustrated a lot of twos,
Mm-hmm.
with that, because they're not finding sort of the emotional
Traction.
string, or this, yeah, I don't want to totally stereotype, but just that they're not seeing me needing something in any clear
Mm,
way,
mhm.
right? Or I appear self-contained, I mean,
And
you know,
impartial.
and impartial, and I'm significantly dissociated from myself, probably a lot on an emotional level, right?
Don't even
So
exist.
yeah, exactly. So well, like, there's even a guy just recently who contacted me through the Facebook group, who's a two, and he's watched my YouTube series, and he's just remarking on how there's nothing personal. He has no idea how I'm even connecting to this material that I'm talking about, and all of this archetypal shit and these symbols and metaphors and stuff. It's
Mm,
like, I can't see, he's saying this to me, I can't see how this even relates to you, or why you're even interested in this stuff.
mm,
And he's confessing to me, so to speak, because he knows the Enneagram fairly well, that because he can't see where my emotional hook is into that kind of archetypal mythological space, it's hard for him to almost take in the information more fully as he'd like
That
to,
is
Mm-hmm.
because
so weird.
yeah, that's just
Yeah.
bizarre to
Well,
me.
because you need to create a story to be able to take it in.
I think someone had said
Yeah.
something to us at when we were in New York. I don't remember who, but that a suggestion of something we do for the podcast, that we should talk more about how things affect us. And I think they were meaning like emotionally affect us. And
mhm.
I'm sitting there thinking like, why?
Yeah.
People
But
want
I
to
mean, this
know.
yeah, this is kind of like how I think the example that they gave was someone had enveloped a whole crowd into their emotional landscape in a way that they were talking about their own personal experience and how it affected them and how they felt about it. And it's just like a completely different world. I like
Yeah.
that
That
people,
doesn't even occur to me.
yeah, that it seems alien to me that people need that or really respond to that. I mean, I know that people respond to emotions, but the idea of bringing others into my own emotional experience seems like I didn't know that people reacted so strongly to that.
Hmm.
And that's basically what I've recognized that the heart types are doing to me.
Yeah.
So I consider myself pretty heady for a 4.
Hmm.
Um, so like, do y'all see me doing this kind of shit too?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think the thing about you as a four that people can definitely pick up online even is that you can express disgust in a way that makes people feel shitty. Like, I think there's a
Yeah,
way that
yeah,
A,
okay.
a disgust, a
Yeah.
disgust landscape,
It's not
disgusted
it's
landscape.
not positive. It's not always
Yeah. Yeah.
positive.
Yeah, okay, I see that. Yeah, that's funny.
like you can create a space of just like everything, not just like everything sucks intellectually, like, oh, this
No,
sucks, but
yeah.
just like the feeling of disgust
Yeah.
of I feel like I definitely feel that from fours, and it's just emanating on multiple levels, not just verbally, of just ill, just like fuck that, and that's just disgusting, which is an emotional landscape
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, I feel that. Do you also, like, when I'm discussing ideas and stuff like that, see my heart centeredness?
Mm,
That's one thing I wanted to get into, is to dig into that, because there's definitely a difference in the way we all frame the Enneagram. And I think that was one of the things that got us into this conversation is, how did all of us learn the Enneagram? And I think there's a way that you frame things in terms of images that have these sort of huge significant themes, and I don't know if I fully understand it, but it's just completely foreign to me. That's just coming from a completely opposite,
Mm, yeah.
you know, a way that you start from like some kind of essential thing. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like
I'm always interested in what I think of as like the eternal, but it's not like the eternal is like the holy. It's like, I mean, it can be, but it's just like there's something transcendent that is poking like from another dimension that is poking into this dimension or something like that.
And no
yeah,
one else understands it. It's just
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's different from like, David's sort of archetypal. His is, it's like a universal, this is the foundation of the universe type of thing, whereas yours is kind of like it's like a romantic heart connection to something essential. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That
that's
makes
Interesting.
perfect sense.
like,
Yeah.
it's like you're in love with like when
Egypt.
ideas come for you, like you're in love with it. It's almost like you
That's
want to
true.
like be cradled by it, like it's a very, yeah, I don't know if that's, yeah, that's what it
That
feels like
actually
to
is
me.
is very accurate. That's interesting.
But it
Interesting.
it feels hard, it feels
Yeah.
Mhm.
like you're falling in love with or having a heart experience. It just, yeah, it just comes
Hmm.
across very differently. And then when people, respond to the way you talk about the Enneagram, like a lot of people end up feeling like you're explaining things or framing things in a very poetic way. I think
Mm.
that's there's some kind of a romanticism in the way in
Yeah,
which
it's
you're
interesting.
looking at the Enneagram.
Yeah, that's actually really, really interesting to hear. Because like I do see some of that in myself where I'm like, listen, I don't care about the Enneagram. What I care about is how it transforms, blah blah blah. Like it's like yeah, it's almost like a bad romantic
Yes.
comedy or
Yeah.
something. Or like yeah, like Love Actually part Enneagram or something, like
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, that's
absolutely.
hilarious. That's interesting.
But yeah, that's very interesting to me. Just looking at hard types in general, that the way we are all approaching the Enneagram, but from the different centers, and the effect that hard types have on me, and how I feel like I can access my emotions, because that's where they're taking me. And so it's
Mhm.
just a really interesting insight. And I'm interested in what's like the higher vibration of whatever this is. Like how does the way we talked about like body centered experiences and how that can be like transformative. So I'm really curious about like what would be a transformative heart experience that's something you could do intentionally. That's one of the things that came up in the last one.
Ooh,
How do you
yeah, sign me
intentionally
up.
yeah, how do you intentionally create an experience in the heart space?
How do you intentionally
Well,
pet the cat?
I think it's pretty easy. Like, I mean, oh no, I'm gonna like sort of fall into my own stereotype, but
Yeah,
that I've
you
painted
are.
for myself. But
That's okay.
like leading people through Egypt, right? Like when I've had trips where I've led people through Egypt, like symbol is a way of connecting thought to emotion, right? That's
A
like
symbol, like symbolism.
symbol is not like a symbol, like there's a difference between a sign and a symbol, right? Like a
Right.
sign is just like like a stop sign, it just signifies
Mhm.
one thing, whereas a symbol has meaning that is like almost repeats into affinity, yet it's not arbitrary.
Mhm.
And so like you go to Egypt and you can connect to certain mythological images, to certain stories of certain deities, uh, all kinds of things. Like my aim when I bring somebody to Egypt is to give them a sense of how to feed their hunger for developing their inner life, because I see Egypt with all its flaws as still being a civilization dedicated to developing an inner life for its citizens, right? Like, and so there's a way that I feel like using symbol and using metaphor and using image, it's like I don't care so much that you know a lot of stuff about Egypt. I care that it impacts you, that it changes your sense of who you are and changes your sense of what's possible in who you are. And so, I mean, that's just like one clear example, but it's like I think what it means for me as a for getting into that emotional landscape is like I don't just care that you see my emotions I don't give a fuck if you participate in them or mirror them so much. What I care about is that, like, at least the heart of, like, when I'm present and not just doing my personality bullshit, is that you're transformed by something in the way that I feel transformed by something. Not
Mm.
the same transformation, but it's like I'll talk about the fucking Jed column of Osiris, which is the whole thing and what it means, and and I hope that it, like, as a symbol, comes alive in the person that I've been sharing with in a way that,
Mm.
it doesn't have to be the same way as me, but it's like I want it to be alive in somebody's heart. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
So
Yeah,
that's
definitely.
where I was going. Yeah, that's where that was taking me. It's, I mean, it's the phrase getting to the heart of something, right?
Hmm.
It's you're kind of saying to me, wanting the person to have an experience of the very center, the very heart of whatever, say, a given symbol is, and it to be sort of a heart transfer of energy.
Mm,
You know what I
mhm,
mean? It's
Yeah.
it's like getting it's another way to do depth. Is the idea of getting to the heart of something, right? Is getting to the very center of that glowing, beating, alive heart, and that's part of, like, the eternal is like a symbol that's really truly an archetypal mythological symbol in some sense has a beating heart to it,
mhm,
right? I mean,
mhm,
and it's a heart that's never going to die, and that's why
mhm,
certain symbols have a certain power, is specifically because of that,
mhm,
because it's a certain kind of perfection and completeness, or just distillation of something down to its essence, that it actually is, representing something that is an eternal beating heart.
Wow.
absolutely. Yeah, getting into that heart space is like allowing something to change or transform your sense of who you are. And I think that, and who the other person is, and like that there's, in a sense, like, yeah, I think this is great. Like, it's because it's really getting at the core of, I think, what the heart types are all about. Like the two, through relatedness, it's like transforming you and I through, it's the part of our identity that we know through relationship, right? And how we're transformed through relationship. And for three, it's how we're transformed through actualizing our potential, whatever that might be. That there's this inherent sense of possibility in us, or something along those lines, like some kind of vision of what is possible, or what our potential is, that we can be realized, it can be uh, transformed through the experience of being and doing. And then for the four, it's like it's similar, where it's like it's more inside. It's like the heart inside the heart, but it's like
Hmm.
trying to find, like, like I've said this term before, but like the kernel or the source of identity itself, and
Hmm.
trying to, like, fully be that, and find ways that we can all kind of be in that space of being our fullest self. And speaking to what David was just saying, for listeners who are familiar with Gurdjieff at all, Gurdjieff identified there's like the body center, there's the hearts, or the emotional center is what he called it, the intellectual center. And there's the higher emotional center and the higher intellectual center. And what he said is, these are sort of like higher spiritual aspects that are like sort of beyond the usual centers. But he said that the language of the higher emotional center is myth, and the language
Mm,
of the higher intellectual center is symbol.
mm.
And I don't want to say too much about that, but it is this sense of how we reach beyond our habitual sense of selves.
So it's interesting, myth, because that myth is a story that places you in an emotional landscape.
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Man, this is really
Mhm,
interesting. I've been
Mhm.
thinking there was once, I think I'd asked a question in the group about love. Like, how do
mm,
you, it's an interesting conversation because how do you decipher feelings of infatuation from like legit falling in love with someone? And what does that even mean to fall in love? And I thought it was a good discussion because it's a heart centered discussion, and I think I remember your answer, John. Loving someone was somehow making space in your heart for them, and I don't think I fully understood it until I maybe been in love like twice in my life, or even really felt like I've experienced that. And with the last three that I was with, that I for the first time in a long time that I felt that I loved someone, and that the sense of something opening in your heart. And I think that was probably facilitated more because she is a hard type, and that got me there sooner than it would have happened otherwise. But I'm interested to talk. I want you guys to talk about like love and hard types. John, when I hear you talk about the things that you're interested in, it does feel like this is like an experience of essential love. You know, like you're getting it's like romantic uh reuniting with the beloved kind of a thing. That's what it feels like. And I don't know where I'm
Yeah.
going with this, but there's something about hard types or the heart space and love.
Yeah, like when you let somebody into your heart, you're letting their being transform your being. Like you're not the same after. Whereas like you can have intense lust or passion or whatever for somebody, but they're down there's like still a separateness, you know?
Yeah.
Like you can have a whole thing with somebody, but you're not transformed by them. But like to actually love somebody is to have your sense of being transformed. You know, it's to have something not just imprinted, but also like you come out the other end different. And it's like,
Hmm.
you know, if they die, part of you dies. That's how it feels, right? It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's that kind of thing because it's like they're in your being. It's different than just in your instincts, in your, you know, social
Body
instinct or
or
your
something.
sexual instinct or your body, um, which themselves are powerful experiences, but it's different than love. And you know, then you could go on to like conscious love and all these other higher levels of love, but just for the like the sense of being in love or something like that, or loving somebody deeply, like just on that level. Yeah, it's like it's that I think it's a great point, like how there is a kind of wanting to fall in loveness in the excuse me in the heart types where there's wanting to be in that place where identity is touched all the
Mhm.
time.
Yeah.
Do you agree, Nancy?
Yeah. Totally. Because I think like I spent a lot of time in my life striving for that or trying to find that, and then like like I've said in the past, like when I got my dog was when I realized what it actually felt like to love something. And now I still look for that, and there's still a lot of me like wanting to fall in love like with reality or with my purpose or with something like that isn't that it's something unnamed. But having something and someone at home that I already have that emotion with is extremely fulfilling. Like I don't feel so stressed and thinned out anymore because I know that when I go home I already have that fulfillment.
It's really interesting to me that heart types are looking for that sort of I don't want to say experience, but like falling in
Transformation.
love. Yeah, like heart
Transformation.
transformation. Yeah,
Yeah.
heart transformation with falling in love with their lives. It's just
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that's pretty fucking different from gut.
yeah, I wrote down a couple of notes for this call because well, I thought, we hyped up the gut so much, I think we have to,
Yeah.
As we should.
as we should.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
anyway, but this is tapping into where we're going anyway, is kind of coming to some of the ideas that I wrote down, which, you can do kind of like if you're using my schema of the sundial, right? The sun rising at 3 and going across the sky to 6, first to 9 at
Mhm.
high noon and 6. So looking at just the heart space, you could do either the idea of a seed underground is
Mm,
4, and that's
mhm,
interesting too
Mhm.
because a seed is kind of like a symbol, like a seed for a tree is the symbol for the tree in some sense, right? It's
yeah,
the thing, um, all condensed into a almost
The source.
a point.
the point, the single point, yeah, that's
Yeah.
going to branch out, right?
Yeah.
And so the seed. is underground, right? Because we're below that line, the horizon line between 3 and 6, right? And so then, and it's transforming, and the seed has to break itself, right? So
Mhm.
that's very four, right? That thing of there's sort of that kind of transformation, right? And then it breaks open into the surface at 3, right? And that's kind of like the sun coming, right? And now the the plant or whatever it is has a relationship to the sort of daylight world after having been in
Mhm.
this sort of
Mhm.
inner space, right? And so that connects into a sort of universal, like the dawn of a new day, right? Kind of
Mhm.
thing, the seed breaking through the ground and that transformation. And there's kind of universal, just joy and glory, right, of something being birthed and coming out into the world, right? And then two is the thing now, sort of in some sense, expressing,
Bearing
you
fruit.
know, bearing fruit. Yeah, it's kind of the flowering is the
Mhm.
two, right? It's like it's the expression now of that individual plant, the fruit or the flower, and the color that's all involved in that, right, is very two, right? Because two is extremely expressive, right? So anyway, and you can do the same kind of run through 4, 3, 2 with like the idea of a caterpillar that's in a cocoon is 4, right? And then breaking out of it is 3, and then the butterfly is 2 or something like that. You can go through
Mhm.
that. Anyway, it's got that transform transformative thing, and there is something, like flowers and butterflies. I mean, they're silly on one level depending on how you depict them, but it's got that sort of heart touching, magic to it. And people give flowers as an expression of love, and et cetera, et cetera. Anyway.
Yeah, and if you've ever been like out in the woods like before dawn, like when the moon's gone down but the sun hasn't risen. Um I used to go out there when I'd go hunting. Um but but there's that like deathly quietness of when the
Mhm.
moon's gone down, the sun hasn't come up, and it's just pitch black out. And it feels like you're on a different planet where
Mhm.
that feels very four. And then as this, like, using the sundial expression, but as the sun comes up, it does feel like all parts of that feels very magical. Like when you're sitting out there and you get to like there's nothing and then the world wakes up and there's something and then there's everything. It's a really cool experience. You should do it
There's a
sometime.
quality at dawn of like anything could happen
Mhm.
now, right? I mean, possibilities in sort of the positive sense, right?
Mhm. But there's also the time before that where there's just
Sure.
like everything's dead, nothing's moving. It's all like the nocturnal things are in bed and the morning things are asleep and there's
Right.
like nothing.
That ties into four and dreams, right? So to the degree that you could associate four with the night is the whole dream world, right? Which is an inner world.
Mhm.
Yeah, I resonate with that time. Like y'all know, I stay up till 4 or 5 in the morning almost every
Yeah.
night, and
Uh-huh.
naturally, and like that's what it feels like. Is yeah, it's like that death. It's like the seed of the possibility, and like I have. I think y'all have seen on my hand that tattoo of the eye weeping.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Hmm.
It's based on the sixth hour of the Book of the Earth of Egypt, and it's
Hmm.
like the sixth hour is like the 4 or 5 space
Hmm.
on the Enneagram of that like transformational in betweenness where it's like you lose sight of the beginning and you can't go back, but you don't know the path forward. And it's like that, it's like a stillness or a transition point where there's no reverting back to where you started from. And yeah, that feels like that's like I think a lot of the 4 space for me.
Mm.
That gap, and that's interesting in Enneagram, looking at the Enneagram symbol, because that's part of what that gap means between
Hmm.
4 and 5. If you're going in that direction, right? 4, 3, 2, 9, 1, 9, da, da, da. Yeah, you can't go back to 5, right? When you're and there's that. and there's sort of a more profound, it's more what am I trying to say, emphasized by that gap that you can't go back.
Right. I mean,
Right.
the Gurdjieff Enneagram of process is like you start at 9 and you go around the Enneagram clockwise back to 9.
Yeah.
And in that process point of whatever phenomenon you're mapping on the Enneagram, the point between 4 and 5 is the place where the process is most prone to falling apart.
Mhm.
And so for like a real transformation to happen requires a certain kind of chaos or what Gurdjieff and Bennett would call hazard, like a kind of unpredictability where you have to jump off the ledge and not know exactly where you're going to land, but you can't go back. Like you have to really be in an in between place. And that's what the weeping eye represents for me. It's like a loss and with with a sort of glimmer of hope that the force space feels like, getting into that part of the heart.
Which kind of reminds me or calls to mind that aspect of falling in love, that someone has taken up space in your heart and to the
Hmm.
point where you've been transformed, you're a different person. And that idea of the phrasing falling in love, I don't know where the fuck that came from, but like, what are you falling in? I guess it's the idea that you've falling into that experience is like you don't know what's on the other side.
There's no ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't know who you're going to be on the other side, that you've taken in
Right.
someone that degree. So maybe that represents that gap.
It's cool kind of hearing y'all as body types kind of get in the heart center this way, you know?
Yeah, like, I realize how like this is a different experience,
Yeah.
just getting swept up emotionally more so than I would otherwise. And like why, like just sort of, why is that happening? How am I getting so pulled from an emotional into an emotional space? And so it's like, oh, this is what, you know, hard types are doing all the time. And so it's just a very different,
Hmm.
completely, it feels like, a part of my blind spot is being activated.
Sure. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Especially for 8. That's the center that's least
Mm.
in touch with. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's cool. Like y'all talking about like the experience of things, and then we're talking like, I don't know, identity of things. And there's like a relationship there, but there's a contrast that's also very clear.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had some experiences with threes, especially, and I don't even know what's happening. But it's, of course, I never do.
Very out
um,
of character for you.
yeah, but it's the sense of I've used you guys have. I don't know if maybe even talked about it on the podcast, but just that direct heart streaming, and
Yeah.
it's particular in threes. I'm I'm not sure what it is exactly, but it's somewhat similar to nine in the sense of there's a capacity to channel, sort of to be in a neutral point on one level,
Mm,
and thereby the three in relation to me is like directly seeing my heart,
Yeah.
and you feel it in your and I feel it in my heart, and I don't
Yeah.
know what's
mm.
happening because I'm
Just this feeling.
yeah, and
Is
it's
it
like,
heartburn?
oh wow, I have a heart. Yeah. um so yeah, I don't know what else to say about it, but it's like, oh okay, yeah, hearts. Wow,
Well, you know, well, I'll say what it feels like for me. Like I felt like thing that I feel with threes sometimes is that I just feel so incredibly seen. Like the amount of like
yeah.
this person is actually seeing like what I'm about on a very
Hmm.
deep level. And I don't know why that feels so emotional, but it
One
does.
one piece of it is that threes see how you see yourself.
Oh,
Mm, damn.
Yeah.
Bullseye.
Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah, that's just hitting me.
Damn.
oh
Yeah,
wow.
that's good.
Yeah, and I think maybe that part of what it affects me so deeply is that they're seeing how I see myself, and she's into it. Like she's like,
Yeah, yeah.
like it was like I think I told John I was like I can't. She's really into me. Like she's like this experience of. I mean, like I've had experiences of girls that were really into me, but there was something about like a direct link to my heart from that
Yeah.
experience, that where it was like a heart to heart. Like she's really into me, like on a very deep emotional level, and it just blew me away. It just blew me away.
Totally. Damn.
So
I
maybe
hope we're
the heart
not.
types are as good as the gut types. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
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 Maybe. Just
Well,
maybe.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting how it's like a whole other domain and so
Yeah.
powerful,
Completely.
and yet,
Completely. Yeah.
yeah, it's fascinating because it's like for the heart types in everybody's life, it's like that's what they're looking for all the time is a sense of touch and transformation and
Yeah.
Mhm.
and being in the space. But I also appreciate how much cred we're able to give threes because so many fuckers don't give threes enough credit.
Yeah, I
And like,
appreciate that a lot.
Yeah.
yeah, and if you can't give threes the credit they deserve, it's because you have a dead fucking heart.
Yeah. No, threes are really emotional, man. Like that's
Yeah.
been my direct experience, and
Yeah. Totally.
the hardest breakups that I've had have been with threes, and I realized it's because I was so affected on a heart level, more so than any other type that I've been with.
So, like, one way we can do it is we can shit on twos and fours
Yeah,
and
let's do
say
that.
that. So, and we can say two and four is like sort of a really specific agenda around the heart,
Yeah.
right? And a
Mhm.
specific
Mhm.
coloration, and it's well, just like we talked about in object relations, the hexad types are more sort of specialized into whatever their thing is, right? Whereas 3, 6, and 9, there's a considerable amount of play, so to speak. There's
Yeah.
a lot of room for, well, for one thing, there's room to channel, right? And so
Yeah.
that's a piece of what we're speaking to with 3.
Mm.
I'm loving this call. I'm feeling like so rejuvenated and so in my heart. Like honestly, this is just great. I'm just sitting
And you
here
could stay
smiling
up
like a big
forever and not sleep.
well, honestly, I'm not that tired anymore. So
Yeah, see.
I'm sure I will go to sleep when I lie down. But
In
John,
5 minutes.
yeah,
I
exactly.
you know what struck me just now, because I've been thinking the whole time, like what are some like collective large scale experiences that people have that are in the heart space, and then I thought of the kind of experiences people have at concerts, like your favorite
Yeah.
Mm,
band
yeah.
and a song that really hits you in the heart, and people are
Yeah,
crying, and you're having a collective experience of a
yeah.
collective emotional heart experience through a song.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think.
And I
And
think more like a more recent since we're COVID, right now, a more recent example is like the marches.
Mhm.
If you go to these
yeah,
marches, that is the
they're
same
very heartfelt.
experience.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Mm.
Also, like, I mean, I think what happens for a lot of people is they go to a church and they might experience it
Yeah.
Yep.
once,
Yep.
but then they keep going back to church as a habit, thinking they're going to get that experience again. Like, like they just get attached to the shell of it rather than the living experience of it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
that's
yeah,
good.
and I think that that's a good point because that's totally how I was sucked into church. Is like they
Mm.
gave me that heart experience, like every now and again, and I was relating that to, oh, that's God touching my heart, and it's like,
Yeah.
no,
Exactly.
that's just your fucking person, like that's just your fucking heart.
You've ever seen those because because I grew up in church, and so you recognize, looking back at it, sort of the mechanics of
Hmm.
the parts that are integral to getting people into those states. And if you've seen like those huge um evangelical whatever
Assembly of God.
events, yeah,
Oh
where they
yeah,
have a
yeah.
fuck ton of people in a stadium or something,
Yep.
and you notice how like they have to do the music part,
Yep.
the part where
Hmm.
people are singing, and because that's the part where your heart opens.
Hmm.
That's the part that and so I'm recognizing now that music is an integral part of connecting to the emotional center, or
Yeah.
getting people to
Art.
like,
Yeah.
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 I think I've seen, because you all know I'm into Michael teachings and stuff, and they talk about like how to connect to the center that we're disconnected from or whatever, and
Hmm.
different types of meditation for the different centers. And they talk about how listening to music and sort of musical based meditations as a way to get in touch with the heart center. So now just putting those two things together, how um big cults use music as a tool to get people to open up their hearts.
Absolutely.
Yeah, when I am having a hard time meditating, I will use music. I try not to lean on it too much though, because it can kind of offer like a false.
Yeah, I mean, meditation is not to get you into a state; it's to be in a place of allowing. So, like, you're with many states, but sometimes, sometimes you need music to unlock the heart center so that you can be in that place of receiving. But it's not like meditation gets you into a state and then you come back to normal state or something.
Right.
That's like the mistake people make.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah, this is a good call.
Yeah, that's good.
When we do head center, we should get Courtney on.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yep.
I
do
love
that.
listening to Courtney talk. I could listen to it
Yeah.
all day.
All right, guys.
All right, we'll talk later.
Yep.
Okay, bye.
Later.
Right,
Bye.
Bye.
You're suffering for God.